Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with on-air personality and Professor Beehive discussing what it takes to make it in radio, carving out a lane for himself, and returning to his alma mater, CAU, to teach college radio. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and I'm sitting down with the homie, on-air personality, Hot 1079, and just all-around dope person, Beehive.
What's going on, Sammy?
How are you?
Feeling good, feeling great. I'm happy to be in this thing.
I'm happy that you're here finally. You are someone that I have admired from afar, being that we're both from the same side of town,
That's
the west
right.
side of Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
and we graduated from the same high school, Mays High School.
Correct.
And you're stellar at what you do.
Oh, man. Thank you so much, Sammy. But see, don't get it messed up. I've been watching your podcast as well.
Thank you.
Ray Daniels, excellent. Wendy Day, excellent work as well. So don't start with me now. Yeah.
Thank you. Nah, for real though, seriously, you're really good at what you do, and I think that in terms of interview styles, you're somebody that I would look to see, how to frame questions, how to process, what's coming to me, and like how to move on forward with the conversation. So, bravo.
Thank you.
Neither here nor there. We're gonna get into how you're so excellent and like how you got to this point. So, being from the west side of Atlanta, you eventually you graduated from Mays High School, and then you went to Clark. So you stayed in the city for school.
That's right.
My question for you is like, one, why did you choose Clark? And it's full circle too, because we'll get into that. You are a professor there now.
Correct.
And just for those of you that don't know, he can be heard on your radio, on your airwaves. What's your saying? What you say?
Radio, shout it.
Shout it.
Yeah. Hot 1079, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Wednesday, and on Sundays from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the after party from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.
Just working.
Yeah,
It's
the
the
work
grind.
never stops. It never stops. But I chose to go to Clark Atlanta University. First of all, I was over there at Mays High, and I knew that it was time for me to go off to college. So unlike a lot of my other contemporaries at that time, everybody else was applying about 10 and 12 schools. I only applied to one.
Oh, really?
So if Clark didn't accept me, I would have been out here in these streets getting busy with everybody else. So I said, okay, my teacher, Miss DeBose at that time, she had gone to Spelman. My sister had also went to Spelman as well. But she was saying, Brian, Clark, they have a great communications program. I mean, back then I was in the music as well, too. So, I mean, it only made sense. That was the closest thing I could get to majoring in music was radio. So Clark Atlanta was the obvious choice for me. And then when I got the course curriculum and I saw I only had to do Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 because I was not no mathematician. That was not happening. I said, this is the place for me.
Yeah.
And when they accepted me, actually, me and my brother, we came in together. And
Blood brother?
Yeah, my older brother.
Oh, okay.
But he decided not to stay, and he went to another school, and I stayed over there, and I wound up graduating in 4.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Yeah, and you mentioned that you had an interest in music early on. Talk about the first time that you realized that like music was something that you were very passionate about, and then in what way, I know that you, I'll let you tell your story, but in what ways did you explore music early on?
See, I'm angry because my phone is off right now. But I got a picture that actually proves that I was one of the coldest rappers out of the West Side at that time. You can see me going crazy at Mays High in that lunchroom with about 100 folks standing around me.
Yes.
And I got the documentation. And this is how serious it was. Somebody had to whip out their camera before Instagram to take a picture of this because they were like, we got to remember this guy was cranking up this lunchroom.
Absolutely.
But back then, I was always into music and I always had a passion for music. Folks like Goody Mob, Outkast, the Dungeon Family, all of them boys. I was listening to that on a regular basis. No Limit, Master P, all of them folk, 3-6 Mafia, all of my favorite Southern artists. Can't forget about UGK. All of them, I was listening to them on a regular basis, and I always just, first of all, I grew up, we didn't have cable in the house. So how were you going to get your entertainment? It was through that boom box. So I'd be listening to the radio 24/7, buying CDs from Sam Goody and Peppermint and Greenbrier every day. And I just go home and meditate and just listen to music and pass time.
Wow. You had like such a very typical, very normal West Side childhood
Exactly.
upbringing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like my older sister probably, she actually went to Clark too, but she probably can attest to the same
Exactly.
situation. A lot of people that I have on this podcast, they went to the Peppermint. Yeah, like that's dope. And so eventually you what made you give up like rap? What was the catch there?
I didn't know nobody, and I didn't have any connections into the industry. It was just a simple case of I was rapping, I was putting out mixtapes, and I was trying to do something at that time. But
And what was putting out a mixtape at that time?
putting out a mixtape at that time was going into the studio, recording a whole project at $75 an hour somewhere, and then recording it, putting it onto a CD, and then sending it off to get pressed up, going to get your own covers made, get about 500 to 1,000 covers made. And I mean, I remember to this day, me and my boy Keno, Akeem, what up though, fool? Me and him dropped this mixtape, and we put it out, and we only had like 500 copies. Then we went back down to the mixtape store in Underground at 5 Points, and it was bootleg. And when we saw that, we're like, oh, we got something going on in here. We're going to blow up.
Oh, they bootlegged y'all CD.
Exactly. They bootlegged our CD after the first time we put it out because it was going off. It was going off, okay? But we just never... I mean, he wound up having kids. I was in school. The next thing you know, my first baby popped out of nowhere, and it was like, you know what, it's job time, fellas.
Right.
Yeah.
We gotta figure it out. This rap thing, this is a dream.
Yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I know that your brand and like just what you push and your movement has a lot to do with supporting independent artists, and there are a lot of independent artists that listen to this podcast, as well as producers and just aspiring dreamers of this business. So I admire that because, you know, my platform started off as a platform for discovery and discovering new artists and faces in the creative industry. Why was that important, and how can you relate to these people that you're bringing, you know, and really be breaking careers? Like, we'll talk about some of the careers that you've already been a part of and giving them a platform, and to see where they are now, that growth. But I'm curious to know, like, why was that an important thing when you were trying to figure out what it was that made Beehive Beehive?
Well, for me, as I told you earlier, I was a rapper myself. So I understood what they were facing and what they were up against. And if there was a Beehive back then, I probably would have been on.
Right.
So when I found myself in a position to be able to do it, and I think that's one of those home field advantages that we have by being local, is that we actually care for the community, and the community is actually a part of us. The community is our family. So when I would reach out to people, or when people would reach out to me, I would help them just based off of the strength that, oh, you went to Maze, DC Young Fly, I see you on Instagram doing your thing. Well, they say he went to Maze too. Well, go ahead and bring him on in here. Let's get him on the radio, and you take off from here. I ain't asking you for nothing. I ain't following you all over the place. You just come in here, you do your thing, and you going about your business. And it would go that way with all of the different artists that I would meet. I simply just really wanted to help. But early on in my career, I was faced with so much oppression, I had to figure out a way to transmute that negative energy into something positive.
Absolutely.
So I found myself still not being able to get to where I wanted to get to, but I knew that I was in a place to where I could help other folks out. So I said, well, if I can't get to where I'm trying to go, I'm going to make sure that I can help other folks get to where they're trying to go, that's in a similar position but in a different field.
Exactly. Absolutely. So let's rewind a little bit. You're at Clark Atlanta University. At what point, you know, you studied radio, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So at what point were you like, okay, it's time to figure this out? Like, I need to maybe get an internship or a job?
Mm-hmm. I was at Clark Atlanta University. It was my junior year, and I was getting ready to switch my major to education.
Oh.
And because I was thinking to myself, I don't know nobody that's on the radio. I don't know nobody that's in the entertainment industry. So I don't know anybody that's going to help me out. I didn't even know where the radio station was at the time.
Right.
But it just so happened one of my classmates, a guy by the name of Ryan Moore, what up though, Ryan? Ryan was in class with me, and basically I treated Clark the same way I treated high school, so I'd be in there cutting up in class, just having a good time all the time. And he was like, B, you funny, man. You need to come up here to the radio station and get an internship. Matter of fact, send me your resume and I'll put you down.
And he was working there at the time?
He was working there as a sales assistant already as a junior at Clark.
Wow.
And I was thinking to myself, you in class with me? What you mean you working at a radio station? Sure enough, I gave that boy my resume, and I went up there for the resume meeting. This guy, he was the internship coordinator at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, so he put me down with my internship, but it wasn't really an internship starting off. It was a volunteership.
What that mean?
That mean that Thanksgiving, when it was time to feed the homeless, they called me out. They called me out again on Christmas to go feed the homeless again. Then they tried to call me out again on King Day to go feed the homeless. And I said, you know what, guess what? I ain't showing up. I ain't got time for this. I did not sign up to feed the homeless.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, yep, I just lost my internship, because they would tell you at the internship orientation, it's not about doing what you want to do. You do what you have to do around here. So if we tell you to come out here and do this, the second you don't come to an event, you out. So when I didn't go to King Day, I said, well, I guess I'm out.
Right.
And then they called me back to go to a Super Bowl party that they were having. And when I went to that Super Bowl party, that's when I met a lady named Latoya. She was over promotions at that time. And I said, Latoya, I'm trying to get in the building. I said, all of this feeding the homeless every 5 minutes. I said, this ain't going to cut it. I need an internship. Then she brought me into the building to do an internship. And I was sitting in promotions for a strong year, looking crazy then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I feel like everybody in radio has that first taste of radio through promotions usually.
Of course.
Why is promotion such a pivotal point in anybody's career in radio? Like, I mean, there's obviously some loopholes and some people who may have just gone straight into programming and been blessed to do the talent first. But I think it's special when you go through that experience, because you know what is promotions for those that don't know.
Promotions is basically the arm of radio that, you know, integrates radio into the streets. Mm-hmm. So with promotions, basically when you come in as an intern, you putting up the flyers, you putting up the posters at birthday bash, you handing out the tickets and the prizes, you getting them for we used to call it getting winners back then. We'd just run back there to the prize closet to get the winners prizes and then bring them back up there to the front. And you would basically get a chance to go out on remotes with the personalities and see exactly what it was that they were doing, set up the remotes, and learn that stuff. Shout out Jack, because Jack was one of the first people that took me out on a remote with him. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. I remember, this is how time passes and this is how crazy things are and how powerful words are. We did a remote. It was me, Jack, and Coco Brother. And I remember Coco Brother saying, yeah, I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to do a gospel event inside of State Farm, Phillips Arena at that time. Right. And I was like, that's crazy. He about to do it big. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, by the time I looked up, about a good 5-6 years later, he was doing the Exodus at the Dome.
Wow. And
it was huge. Right. But I just remember him just having that concept while we were setting up his remote. And that's when I realized that, okay, you can have dreams, you can make them come to fruition, but you got to be about that business of doing the work to make them happen.
You got to execute it. Yeah, you can manifest all you want, but then we got to execute. Somebody got to make it happen. That's what's that's a great story. Yeah, I think promotions is definitely where you're able to, one, build your name in the streets first, and it's more organic than trying to like do that. But now, what you've mastered is and I guess we can dive into it more, but like the digital side of like leveraging a platform. You have over like 14,000 subscribers on YouTube. Your social media is really strong. Like you are very locked in, and you realize there was like a space for you there.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you determined that. I guess I don't want to like skip so many things, because we talked about the internship. Like, how did you get on air? How long did it take you to go from interning? I already know the process is different on the radio side.
It was terrible back then. I interned for 2 years, then I ran the board for another 2 years before I finally got on the air. So that was like a whole 4-year process from the time that I was an intern to actually being on the air overnights doing the after party. Right. And while I was doing that after party, that's when I began producing Gangsta Grills Radio with DJ Drama, Trendsetter Sense, and Don Cannon. And that's when Sense gave me the idea to start doing interviews doing my show. I was talking to Sense one day. He was like, B-High, what it is that you want to do? What you trying to be? I said, I'm trying to be big like DJ Drama. And he was like, can you do interviews on your show? And I was like, yeah, I could do interviews on my show, I guess. But I mean, I'm coming on at 2 a.m. in the morning. Ain't nobody trying to hear no interview. He said, I don't care. Can you do interviews on your show? I said, well, I guess so. He said, well, start doing them. He gave me that and a few other pieces of the game to apply to my game. So what happened was, when I started doing the interviews, I was still overnight, but I was like, okay, if I do this at 2 a.m., everybody's not going to hear it. Now, I did have a strong fan base at 2 a.m., but I knew that everybody wouldn't hear it. So I was able to use my education from Clark Atlanta, because what I had learned while I was in school was that the internet was the future of radio. So we would talk about internet radio in class and stuff like that. And internet radio is the term that we called it back then, but that became Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and all of that stuff. That's what internet radio to us was back then. So when I saw YouTube, I said, okay, this looks like an opportunity for me to do and implement internet radio into what I have going on right now.
Right.
So when I started doing the interviews, I was like, okay, I'm going to put them up on YouTube. But what I messed up at early on was that I didn't own my content. I owned the content, but own it as far as putting it on my personal YouTube page. So
where were you uploading it?
Whoever was shooting it, they would upload it for me.
Oh.
That's how that was going, because I was just trying to get it on the internet. I didn't know what I was really, really doing.
You hadn't created the platform.
Exactly. I hadn't created the platform. So I was basically giving away my content.
Wow.
And when I was giving away that content, I was starting to grow, but then it was all over the place. So I would have an interview on this person page, that person page. Whoever was shooting, they would be able to put up an interview of me. And it left me at the mercy of them as well. So if they wanted to take down my interviews, they could. If they wanted to make it private, they could. So when I finally realized that I needed to start putting it on my own personal page, that's when it started to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long have you had like your YouTube platform?
My personal page, I didn't start going in on it until 2015.
Wow.
So I started at like maybe about 200 subscribers. Then, I got it up to 40,000 now, but it was basically like a new 10,000 folks a year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. 41, you at 41K.
Yeah.
In a couple of years. That's a really good growth.
Yeah, thank you.
And what about your content what do you think it is about your content that draws people to not only view it, but subscribe to you and like keep up with what you're doing?
But there are a few secrets when it comes to that YouTube. In 2015, when I went crazy, I did 100 interviews in 2015, another 100 in 2016, another 100 in 2017. So frequency and consistency played a lot into it. But by the summer of 2015, I had got an email from somebody at Google. And I looked at it, I was like, is this spam? Because I'm like, Google ain't got no business emailing me about nothing. But come to find out it was really somebody from Google, and I got YouTube certified. So what I wound up doing was taking a class, and they kind of broke down YouTube and how to go thumbnails, audience growth. I got certified in audience growth. And with audience growth, it just meant that you got to put up that content. So if you look at some of the bigger platforms that are huge, they dropping 5 and 10 pieces of content a day. The more pieces of content that you drop a day, the bigger that platform is going to grow. That's because true. You are a YouTube partner. So they partner with you. So the more content that you put out, the more you have in their platform to grow as well.
Yeah.
So in turn, they turn around and help you grow your platform. So by me dropping that 100 interviews a year, it encouraged YouTube to help me grow. But then also, they were pretty good interviews at that time.
Right.
So basically what I would do, I would bring people in and I would ask them questions that I needed answers to. I didn't ask him no regular questions. I needed answers to those questions. It wasn't that I was just doing an interview. I said, okay, how did you do this? What was it that made you do that? Okay, when you found yourself in this situation, how did you bounce back from that? Okay, and all of those were things that I was going through at the time. So I would get answers from the OGs. So I would also use the platform to break new artists, but I would also use it to bring in OGs to get game from them.
Like the Pastor Troy.
Exactly, your Troys, your Big Gips, your Banners and all them. I bring them in there and I ask them those kind of questions, and it would be a class as well. So they'd be teaching me exactly what it was it took for them to be great, and I would start applying all of that information that they were giving me to my game.
That's dope. That's dope. That's awesome. I think in terms of like a interview style or like, just like branding yourself and separating yourself from what other people are doing, oftentimes personalities may even be known as we talk about gossip or like we're talking about all the things that are pop culture, like what Drake's doing or whoever. You you went left field and did your own thing. You are, like you said, talking to the OGs, giving people game. You don't approach questions to try to get like mess out of it. Can you talk about, how to remain true to yourself when getting into this business? Because obviously you have a lot of mouths coming at you, telling you what you should and should not do as a personality. And you kind of do have to listen to those people too, right? In terms of like you're a program director or whoever, and we'll get to like you early on and those struggles of trying to even get there. But how do you remain true to Beehive and like what it is your mission is from the beginning?
Well, see, it boils down to this right here, Sam, and I'm pretty sure you can relate to this. If you weren't lame, then you know you got conversation. Okay, so if you a nerd trying to come into radio and be this person and reinvent yourself and all this extra stuff, guess what? You're going to drop the ball eventually because that ain't you, partner. So for me, I just maintain my originality and who I was. So I would talk to these people exactly how I'm talking to you right now. Because guess what? I don't have to put on no front. I don't have to snap in or snap out and all of this extra stuff. All I have to do is be myself.
Right.
And that makes it a lot easier when you go into different places. And it's hard sometimes too because I'm a country guy. So you can find yourself in corporate situations trying to turn into a job interview voice Brian. But I slide right on back out of there, back into my normal self because the best way for me to articulate myself is to be myself. And I be exactly that authenticity is what allows me to be able to express myself and talk fast and get that point across. But if I'm worried about how I'm articulating this or what I'm gonna say or what I'm gonna sound like or what I'm looking like, I'm gonna fumble over my words. I ain't gonna know exactly how to bring it. But then also, I just wanted to be myself. I did not want to have to dress a certain way. I did not want to have to look a certain way. I didn't want to have to be a certain way. I wanted to be able to walk into a room and be myself every time so it would not become a job to me. It would become a job if I had to turn into this character all the time. So that's why even on my Instagram, it would say Brian Beehive Hightower. Why? Because Brian Hightower was more popular than Beehive for a long time. And I knew that people knew who Brian Hightower was versus Beehive. So I said, let me go ahead and keep my government name on this thing. So when people saw me and they'd be like, wait a minute, I went to Kyle Heights with that boy. That's Brian Hightower. I know him. So let me go ahead and tune into what he got going on. And it's just more so being comfortable in your own skin.
You have to be.
If you feeling yourself, then I mean, other people are gonna feel you because people gonna feel about you how you feel about yourself. And then also, if you love yourself, it's nothing for you to love other people. But when you don't love yourself, you're gonna be out here hating on folks. You got something to say about folks. You point at people. You trying to find something wrong with them because you know it's something wrong with yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The insecurities are terrible.
Ooh. Give us
Come
a
on
word now, because
it's
you know
crazy.
you know what type of stuff that we deal with,
Exactly.
just in our industry, and it's so competitive, and which is what I want you to talk about too, in terms of when you were first trying to get on, like before you got your shift, even your overnight shift. What sorts of challenges were you facing, and how? I mean, obviously, in the world of radio, we're sending out air checks to our PDs, and to other PDs, to other stations. Like, you're just trying to put yourself in and work on your craft every week. You're just putting out these air checks, right? But what challenges did you face is the first question, and like, how did you overcome those challenges? What were the things that they were telling you needed to work on early on?
Well, people didn't even tell me to work on nothing. They just told me no.
Just no.
It'd be
No,
like,
no
you're not getting
explanation.
on the air. Exactly. It was. I remember going into my evaluation with Uncle Frank Johnson. He used to be the station manager over there at Radio 1 back in the day. And he told me that the PD told him, he said, well, as long as he's here, you'll never get on the air.
Wow.
So you need to figure out what else it is that you want to do.
What?
Yeah. So those were the kind of things that I was up against. Everybody that I came up to basically would be like, no, he ain't it. We're not going to do it. But a lot of times, too, what I kind of look back at 2020, when you got the juice and you local, you a monster. Because if they give you everything, then you already gonna have the people. So how you gonna be able to control this guy if you put him in front of his people and he starts speaking to them? And so I think that played a lot into it. So you can bring a lot of people from out of town that don't have that same fan base or that home field
So
advantage.
they feel like they've helped build you. And,
Exactly. You
yeah.
can't build somebody that's already popping. I mean, I got a big ass family and I know a lot of people. So I'm already feeling myself when I walk in here. And that kind of confidence, a lot of times, it makes people feel a certain type of way when you walk in a room like that, because it's that Atlanta bravado. You know, we all are stars regardless if we on the radio or not. You ain't got to be on the radio to be no star in Atlanta. If you grew up in the hood and everybody know you a star. Shawty Lo was a star long before
Shawty
he
Lo.
became L.O. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So that was one of those things. But everybody just told me no. And it wasn't until Bill Black came and got that same check that I had gave to the previous program director and gave it to Steve Hegwood. Now, mind you, I had been giving the other program director the same check for 2 years. It didn't work. Steve Hegwood came in and heard the exact same air check that the other PD heard and said, okay, put him on the air this weekend.
Wow.
and that was November 4th, 2008. It was the same day that Barack Obama was elected president. That's why I always remember that.
Wow. You was elected too.
Exactly, that
Put in
same day.
position.
Come on now.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
That's a blessing. I mean, it's also so interesting how authoritative figures or people in power have such an effect or impact over your trajectory.
Exactly.
And it's like, do you, even in those, and we had this conversation off the record, but in those moments, of making decisions for yourself, what drove you to continue, like, saying, you know what, I'm still gonna send this air check to the new management? To like, how did you stay uplifted during the times of like wanting to still do this, but like being told no time after time after time?
But by the time the new PD had got there, I was pretty much beat, and I didn't think it was gonna happen for me. So the best it was gonna get for me, I'd be in as a board op, get a few liners and read it behind the mic to try to feel like I'm doing something, because I was like, it's not getting no better than this, so let me just go ahead and at least get this out and feel like I'm doing something. It just so happened that Bill Black came and got that same air check. He said, do you still have that air check you gave me last time? Because I wasn't even submitting it no more after that. I was trying to find me another job. I was like, you know what? This ain't working for me. I've seen it work for other folks, but it's not working for me. So it was through the grace of God and Bill Black that he came back in there and got me and said, let me get this air check, B, and turn it in one more time. And then that's when it broke through for me.
Wow. Yeah, it'd be that one additional time that you almost didn't do it that actually worked for you. Absolutely. So let's talk, go back to like YouTube or like digital versus terrestrial radio. So obviously you have your hands on both. Why do you think that they're both important in 2019, 2020 as we moving forward? Like, what's the pros to terrestrial radio?
Okay. When it comes to terrestrial radio, basically, it's one of those cases to where you in Atlanta. Everybody's in the city of Atlanta. So being able to get on the radio in Atlanta, that automatically puts you in the mix. It ain't no way around that. Then you're on Hot 107.9, which is pretty much moving the culture forward when it comes to hip-hop, period. So being able to be on terrestrial radio allows you to have that reach inside of the city and let people know exactly what's going on at that time. You can go directly to the folks. So for some reason, with me having that after-party shift at 2 a.m., people would die on Friday night. So Doe B, he got killed on a Friday night. I had to get on the air and broadcast that. Exactly. Bankroll Fresh died on a Friday night. I had to get on the air and broadcast that.
That was my birthday.
Exactly. So, I mean, these were stressful times, but that's what a terrestrial radio allowed me to do, is get on the radio and let the city of Atlanta know exactly what was going on. When Nipsey Hussle was shot, guess what? I happened to be on the air again. I had to talk about that. So a lot of times that terrestrial radio is that up to the minute. You can really broadcast it out to a million folks real quick and get to them.
Friday night.
It's them party nights. It's them show nights. Folks on the road.
That's strange. How do you go about, or like, how does it feel for you to have to, internalize those sorts of moments? Because I remember when Nipsey passed too, we were all at the station and like watching, even his funeral procession and things like that. How we have to have a certain level of like emotion, like stability, emotional stability, in order to speak to the people and influence the people in a sense. How do you maintain, especially knowing that like that scenario is common?
Exactly.
So common.
I mean, you just got to give it directly to those people and take your emotions out of it and try to be as unbiased as you possibly can and just try to, preach peace. That's really the whole thing behind it, because at the end of the day, people are dying every day and this happens in the streets, but you got to just say, hey, man, you got to use those moments in time as a time to be able to say, hey, can we figure out a way to have a discussion rather than somebody get shot? You see what I'm saying? Because a lot of times when we go to grabbing those pistols, we can't get those people back. You see what I'm saying? And I mean, people are so rash when they start, handling their business out here in these streets. It's just an emotional street thing. So it's like every time, all of those were all passion deaths. You see what I'm saying? There was never a case of they were just hit and all this extra stuff. It was just passion of the moment, and stuff just kind of spirals out of control and people wind up, dead by the end of it. So it's one of those things that when you get on the air, you just got to kind of preach peace and let people know that, hey, man, this is not the direction that we need to go in. And we got to find better ways to communicate with each other so we can stop this from, perpetuating this same story over and over again with another young, promising black man dying.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And just even in I'm happy that you said unbiased, being able to lead the conversation in an unbiased way, because, we have to talk about things like the political realm of like our elections coming up and all those things, and like being able to report on those with sharing obviously new and upcoming artists. You work for the hottest hip hop station, but there's other sides to other things. So what other topics are you talking about? How are you able to influence and impact? Like how important, I really want you to tell people like how important your job is as a personality, and how you're pretty much, you are the voice for this city and the people globally too, because they look at you online.
Yeah. Well, you got to understand that you're the conduit for the information to get from the celebrities or the powerful people to the people. And a lot of times folks will find themselves trying to become the star just as much as the people that they're trying to talk to. And I never took that approach to journalism, okay? Because we are journalists. We are not stars. We are journalists. We are in communications. So my job is to make sure that your point that you're trying to get across to the people flows through me to my audience in a way that is representative of you and me both well. So with that being said, my main concern would be, open up those doors, give people the opportunity to be able to speak their mind, but just keep it as unbiased as you possibly can. Because a lot of times you can find yourself getting into it too. You see what I'm saying? Like when Trayvon was killed or when Mike Brown was killed, for some reason I would always wind up on the air when the court sentences would come in and somebody would call out. They'd be like, okay, Beehive, we need you to fill in today. But they knew that I was also the Black Power guy on the staff too. So I was like, really, y'all gonna have me on here on my Black Power stuff in the middle of this kind of sticky situation? So I would go in there and I would just kind of speak to the people and let them voice their opinions, because what I wound up having to do was I couldn't really speak my opinion other than these situations are wrong. We got to figure out a better way to, once again, those are pretty much the same situations as the artist died. Conversation probably could have fixed a lot of that stuff before it happens. And one of those things too, like when you're dealing with the police or when you're dealing with just crazy folks in general, you got to be able to de-escalate situations. Don't escalate them, de-escalate them, people. If you can figure out a way to de-escalate that situation, you can find yourself coming out of those situations alive. But a lot of times, the passions get to running high and escalation is what winds up happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we know that in the business there are a lot of ups and great moments, right? You have your my first day on air was the same day that Obama got elected. That was an up. You're not gonna forget that. Interviewing somebody like a David Banner and Bone Crusher walking in is a up for you.
Magical.
That's a magical moment. You didn't expect it to happen. But then there are some downs. Can you talk about some of the challenges, that the things that you are inevitable, like you being laid off is a great example of something that happens all the time in our business. How do you prepare for those things? How do you brace yourself for things that are pretty much inevitable?
Well, when those kind of things happen, when you come into the game young, you don't really see that stuff as being something that's inevitable. You thinking that I'm about to do this forever till I retire.
Right.
And then when you come to work one day and they tell you to take your butt home, it's like, wait a minute now, I didn't sign up for this.
You're like, for what?
Exactly. For what? I've been working my butt off for all these years, working all these overtime hours and all of this extra stuff. But for me, my whole thing was I never really lost track of who I was the whole time. So when I was laid off, my thought process was, okay, now I could get back to living me a regular life. Because this never really did tickle me in such a way that I just needed to have the shine or the fame. I've never been the person for that, and that's the reason why my platform is such, because I'm not here for the fame. I'm not here for the shine. I'm in here to do a job. I'm in here on a mission to give folks a platform to say what they want to say. So when I was laid off during that downtime, the first call I got was from DJ Drummer. He called me. He said, "Hey, B, you can come over here to Mean Streets, man, and I remember one thing that he told me in that conversation that always stuck with me. He said, hey, man, you know, the station, it never really made me or broke me. But you can come over here and you can work with me over here at Mean Streets. We got an XM going on, and you can keep your party going over here. Now, at that moment, when I had left the station after being laid off, I was thinking to myself, oh, I'm done with this. I'm about to go over here and find me a regular job. I'm about to raise these kids. I'm about to kick it with my wife and get to this money and be happy. Right. But when he called me today, I'm riding back home. I was like, dog, okay, so I got to keep on doing it. Then I got another call from Hurricane Dave. They said, all right, now don't be acting funny. We bringing you back. You okay? We bringing you back. I said, okay, cool. But during that time, I was at home. I was at home for approximately about 3 weeks. And I got to thinking over my career, and I was thinking about the things that I could have did and that I should have did. And one of the main things was I could have helped more people. Mm-hmm. And that made me mad because I was sitting in that radio station. I was like, I had all of this opportunity to really put people on and move the culture forward, and I never took advantage of that stuff. So I said, okay, you got to make sure that you help more people. But then also I said, you know what? I could have been on fire when I got laid off, but I wasn't on fire. I had been doing what I was doing, but I wasn't on fire. And I said, if I ever get back in there again, I'm going to set myself on fire, so that if this does happen again, I'll be able to walk wherever I want to walk to and keep the party going.
Exactly.
So when I came back in there off of that downtime, that's when I did that 100 interviews in 2015, because I was on a mission, and I felt like I was on borrowed time, because after you get fired or laid off or whatever that is, you realize that, okay, this time here is not guaranteed. So if it's not guaranteed, I need to make the most of the time that I have. Mm-hmm. So I said, let me just go ahead and go in and go straight to work. And I think it's by the grace, too, of God that I got the views that I got, because there were other people that were doing the same thing that I was doing. And their numbers was not showing up the same way that mine was. And I was thinking to myself, God, what is really going on here? Because this guy had Oprah on his show. You see what I'm saying? This guy talked to Bill Clinton. I ain't talked to nobody. I got views off of Boo Boo the Fool from around the corner. So that's what kind of shocked me after a while. But I think because I was coming from a pure place, mm-hmm. and I was trying to really tell my story and tell other people's story at the same time, because through those interviews, you talking to me, but we still got the same story. So if I went to Maze, you went to Maze, that's part of your story as well. If I did promotions, you did promotion, that's part of your story as well. So you get a chance to tell your story while you're telling somebody else's mm-hmm. story. And I felt like it was imperative that when I got back into the game, I shared everybody's story alike in the game and on the same level. I treat Boo Boo the Fool the same way I would treat Michael Jackson. Absolutely. Everybody's the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm happy you said that, because a lot of times we put the mainstream artists or celebrities or whoever on a pedestal. When they walk through, mm-hmm. you know, we lay out the red carpet for them. Whereas this independent artist, i.e. a 21 or a bankroll mm-hmm. that you broke, you know, during mm-hmm. interviews early on, they deserve, you know, mm-hmm. they became, they're 21. Exactly. And that was, Lord rest his soul, fresh. Yeah.
Exactly. And I say this to say, the reason why I use the word Boo Boo the Fool is because I'm country and I'm just throwing that out there. There ain't no shade to nobody, too.
We here, exactly. Okay? We wouldn't have no disrespect. We here.
But with them boys, I mean, because see, that's another thing in this game. Same thing to me. You would see somebody doing all the stuff that they need to do to blow up, but when nobody take a chance on them, because they weren't hot or they weren't the main thing. And it's like, we don't have time for that. People are trying to live their lives. Let's help people move their lives forward instead of just keeping everybody stagnant in the same place. Because at the end of the day, when I thought about Atlanta, the role that I played in the city for those kind of interviews that you talked about helped to move the culture forward and keep it going, because it got to a point to where if you were not hot, you could not get on the radio. And I was like, hey, y'all, don't y'all realize that if we don't put new artists on the radio or give people an opportunity, the culture is going to leave from here, because we won't have anybody new coming out of the city. Exactly. So my whole thing would be, if you jamming, then come on in. That's all I needed to hear. If you had a good song, if you had a good movement, I would bring you in there and help you get to where you was trying to go. But then, like with somebody like a Fresh, when he passed, that kind of stuff is depressing, because you are investing into his career too. So it's like, I'm trying to help this man get to where he need to go, because he might not have all the platforms that he needed at that time to get there. But I'm like, you know what, Fresh, I'm going to stand with you until you get there. And when you get there, take off and I'll holler at you on the other side. Mm-hmm. But for him to pass, it's like, dog, all of that work that he was putting in, all of the work that I was putting in, it just kind of hurts to see all of that stuff or not. you know.
Trust me, I totally feel
You
you, and
feel
I
me?
understand. Yeah, that situation was really, it hurt a lot of us.
Hmm.
Who was someone that is like one of your favorite interviews today? I know you've talked about it on a few previous interviews that you've been a part of. Like, you know, you enjoyed the moment that you and David Banner, Bone Crusher shared. That was kind of just happened.
Yeah.
But like you've probably at this point interviewed so many people. Is there a certain conversation and that just always comes to mind?
Them No Limit boys, Fiend. I love talking to him. I talk to Fiend all the time, and Moby Dick. Both of them boys right there. They had a lot of game, and then growing up in the '90s, being able to see No Limit with my own eyes and being fans of both of those artists, it was good for me to be able to hear from their mouth exactly what was going on at that time, because you knew that they were making history and that they were making magic, but you didn't know exactly how they were going about doing it. So for Moby to break it down and say, okay, man, it was kind of like almost a sweatshop. We had folks coming in and out. We were making tracks, and it was just going down. It's like, wow, I can see what's going on. But then that was the answer to a question that's part of the formula that you see a lot of people apply, but people don't really recognize it when they see it. So the formula is, the reason why P dominated is because he outworked everybody else, and he dropped. When did we see that formula happen again? With Future. When Future dropped, that man became the GOAT. It happened again with Beehive. When I dropped 100 in a year, 100, those are the numbers that you have to do in order to make a dent into the game, because if you're not putting in the work, you're not going to get there. Right. Fiend gave me some information that helped me out a lot, but this was an off-air conversation when he said, B, you got to just keep on swinging. He said, you ain't got to hit a grand slam every time. He said, bunt the ball. Hit a single, hit a double, but he like, just keep on swinging. Do not stop swinging, and you eventually get to where you're trying to go to. And he wasn't lying when he said that.
That's great advice. Great advice. Now, tell me, what is the hardest thing about your job? What's the most difficult?
Big Gip. That was another one of my favorite ones right there. I forgot
That's
about
legendary.
that one. Yeah, that one. I didn't think it was going to be legendary. Now I'm going to come back to what you just said, but I always forget Gip. Gip came in that thing, and first of all, he started the interview without me.
How?
He just started talking. So at the end of the interview, I had to put the intro to the interview at the beginning of the interview, because he just going to start talking. I was like, if you look at the beginning of the interview, I'm like, all right, Gip, I'm about to get the interview started. Hold up, let me make sure I got everything set up. And he just going to start talking. Because he came in at a snap that day. And I appreciated that, but that was another one of those ones that I learned a lot too. But I don't know why that one slipped my mind, but back what you were saying.
No, that's a great interview. All of your interviews are really dope.
Thank you.
Just some of the people that I wasn't hip to or privy to, you know, that are making dope waves, and you know, you putting people on, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was asking, what's the hardest thing about doing your job? Like, is there moments of difficulty that you find challenging when you talk to certain people, or just like the time? What is it that may be difficult for you?
The hardest part is trying to help everybody, because I'm the type of person, I want to help. If I see what you're trying to do, I'm trying to help you get there. But with that being said, you got people that take your kindness for weakness. Okay, I'm here to help. Now, I ain't trying to come up off you, because I'm good. Right. You see what I'm saying? I'm on the radio. Guess what? After your record blows up and it blows down, I'ma still be on the radio. I'ma still have my platform to say what I want to say. So whether you come on my show or not does not make me or break me at all. Right. My platform is here to help. So getting folks to understand that part too. Negro. I'm trying to help you. I don't want nothing from you. But other than that, there's nothing really difficult about it, because I like to talk. So it'll be days that I might be burnt out. I might have been teaching all day and lecturing all day, and then I go in there and I get on there and I got 3 interviews to do that night. But then by the end of the night, I done did all 3 of those interviews, and I can't help myself. I just like to doggone talk. So that's when I realized that it was a gift for me that I like to talk, because if I didn't like to talk, I wouldn't be able to do it.
That's what you got in trouble for at school?
Exactly. I'd be in Miss Armour class, and next thing you know, I was in A lunch and B lunch, because she would kick me out every day, and I just have to be in lunch every day looking crazy. You see what I'm saying?
I'm already knowing.
Come on.
So being a professor at Clark Atlanta University, that's what you've been doing for how long at this point?
About 2.5 years now.
That's amazing. How full circle is that moment? How did the opportunity come about? And, you know, why was that even an important step for you in your career? I know you mentioned already that you wanted, or you were thinking about getting into education initially before you
Yeah.
even graduated from Clark. So seems very full circle.
Exactly. Basically, that was always part of my plan either way it went. I was planning on teaching by the end of it regardless, because I knew that radio was cool and I enjoyed doing radio and I was good at radio, but I knew that eventually when it was time for me to sit down from behind the mic, like when I got laid off, I was about to go teach right then. I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm out of here.
Right.
Because that's the purpose of having an education. That's why you go get an education, so you can have something to fall back on. I'm not going to just go in here and do radio and not have an education to be able to fall back on after radio is over with.
Right.
So in my case, my old professor Will, who taught me radio, he had left to go to West Georgia to teach, and they didn't have anybody over there handling the radio program at Clark Atlanta University. So he called me up and he was like, "Hey, B, you know, you got your degrees, your credentials and everything?" I said, "Yeah, I got them." He was like, "You want to come over here and teach?" And I was like, "Of course I want to come over here and teach, because that's what I was planning on doing anyway." But the beautiful thing about it is to be able to teach and still be active in the radio game
So different.
at the same time. So, see, I'm going to get a little deeper too. I knew when I got laid off, I said, okay, it's going to be time for you to teach. And what I did not want to happen was me go over there and be a teacher and my students have no respect for me because I didn't do it. So I said that was part of the reason I had to go in too, because I said, okay, let me go back over here and build up my resume, so when it's time for me to teach, my students will know who I am when I come into the class, versus saying, you just another professor with a book trying to show us how to do something. You don't know how to do nothing. You didn't do it big. You weren't doing nothing yourself. So I said, let me go ahead and build up this platform for that. And that was one of the main reasons behind that thought process of building up the YouTube. But then when I was able to go back and teach, it's exciting because, you know, we had Spike Lee come back to the school the other day, and Dr. Eichelberger, he was the one that taught Spike Lee. Even though Spike Lee graduated from Morehouse, he learned how to do film at Clark Atlanta. So while he was over there, he would every time he comes back to Morehouse, he always stops by to holler at Dr. E, and then he'll bring him into school. But Dr. E, he taught Spike Lee, Kenya Barris, Brian Barber, all of these folks that went on to do major things in film, they came through Clark Atlanta and Dr. E. So I saw his legacy and the things that he put down, and that's one of the main things that I wanted to do too. It all boils down of coming out of a spirit of service to the next generation and people like that. So let's break it down even further. If you look at Dr. Dre, why is Dr. Dre so hot? Because he put on Snoop Dogg, he put on 50 Cent, he co-signed Kendrick Lamar, Eminem, The Game. So guess what? If Dr. Dre wanted to put out an album tomorrow and get features from all of them, that album is automatically going to be a platinum album.
Absolutely.
Because he opened up the door and showed love to the next generation. But so often, like my boy Greg Clay, you might know Greg. Greg was on a podcast the other day and he was saying, no, pass the doggone torch. Light somebody else's torch and give them an opportunity to run further with it instead of just holding it for yourself. That is the biggest issue that we have in our community. Nobody wants to pass the torch. So when I came into the game, that was one of my main agendas, was to pass the torch to anybody that had a stick that needed to be lit. It was like, okay, let me light you on fire, let me light you, and everybody go out there. And then also people could see that it was enough room for everybody to be successful. But a lot of times people are getting on that egotistical stuff thinking me, and they don't think that it's enough room for everybody when it's more than enough room and enough money for everybody to be successful.
I agree. And then one thing that you said about being approached about being a professor is that you were prepared.
Oh, yeah.
You were already prepared. You'd already had the things that you needed in order to do what you wanted to do. So I wanted to make note of that. And another thing about, you know, Dr. Dre is that J. Cole used that same approach. And you see now that Return of the Dreamer is crazy. Platinum. And all of the artists who weren't on have gotten their first platinum placement. It's crazy.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful thing. I think that you have such a humble spirit, such a very welcoming spirit and energy, and that's why your platform does what it does versus people who may have like these bigger people that are on their, you know, platform. So
it's the love. You got to lead with the love first. Bone Crusher, he always screams that, to the point that he started a singing group called Love 743. I don't know the numbers, forgive me, Bone. But It's the love.
Yeah.
The love for what you do is going to come across in what it is that you're doing every time.
Absolutely.
It's always going to come across. So I love people, I love myself, and I love what I do.
Yes.
So when you step into the room with me, you're going to feel that love and that energy. And by the end of that moment, if we recorded that, it's going to be a movie in there.
Absolutely. And congrats to the newest addition to your family.
Oh, thank you, Lil B.
Lil
yeah,
B.
Lil B.
You
Young
finally got
Beezy.
you. This your first son.
That's my first son right there. Yeah.
He's gonna be legendary.
Yeah, he is.
He already been taught all the game.
Exactly.
He got the game on the internet too.
But
to
see, my
look behind.
oldest baby, Brianna, she's 13. She already got 1,000 subscribers on YouTube.
She on YouTube too?
Yes.
What's she doing on there, playing with slime?
No.
What
she
she
talking
doing?
her she talking her shit.
I love it.
She's on there talking her shit. And I'm so proud of her. But then I laugh because imagine this, I go into class with my students and I have to say, well, my daughter, she's 13, she got 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So what's your excuse?
What's your excuse? Yeah,
Come on.
absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Well, congrats to you. All of your success. I already know, you're continuing to feed back into the community and that there's going to be a lot of people who benefit from all of your teaching. So I appreciate you.
Now, I appreciate you having me in this thing, Sammy, for real. I really appreciate it because I've been watching the podcast. I say, ain't nobody going to invite me down here. I got some shit to say. Shit.
You sure said it.
Come on.
And you left us with a lot of gems. So I thank you. And tell them where they can find you on social media if they want to get in touch.
Bihigh ATL, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. It doesn't matter. As long as you type in that BHIGHATL, you're going to find me every time.
Absolutely. And as always, you guys can find this podcast at IDM Podcast on social media, as well as myself at Sammy Approved on all social media platforms. Thank you, Bihigh.
Thank you, Sammy.
Appreciate you.
Already appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right.
Real West Side.
Yeah. Shit.
Sonically superior.